Well, you survived the holidays, but we better make sure. So take two fingers, put them right there on your neck. See if you feel something. Not the skin on your neck. See if you feel something below that. You should. That's your pulse. And if you have a pulse, that means you have a heartbeat. And everyone here, I'm guessing, has a heartbeat and is breathing. You are alive. And yet, Jesus tells us that being alive is not necessarily the same as having life. And on our good days, we know that. We know that life has to be about something more than just surviving, more than just breathing, more than just getting by. And that's why we search for things that will give us meaning and fulfillment in life. We want the good life, as we define it. And we use a lot of different ways to define it. And so we search for things that will make us feel good about our lives, feel good about ourselves, that will make us feel like our lives matter, and that we have some sense of meaning and fulfillment. Which means this time of year, we often make resolutions and set goals and make big plans reflecting on the past year, some changes we want to make for the new year. A study was released just last week that says about a third of us typically make resolutions and set goals at the new year. And you can probably guess what is at the top of the list for most people's resolutions. Number one in this study was exercise more. Need to get out there and get moving, right? Number two, I thought was interesting, be happy. I'm going to resolve to be happy. And I think, well, doesn't happiness take more than just a decision? But if you stop and think about that, there's some value in that. We can't always control our circumstances. We can't always control what's going on, but we can control our response to those circumstances. We can control our attitude, and sometimes it is a matter of choosing to be happy, choosing to focus on what is most important. So number two was be happy. Number three was eat healthier. That makes sense, right? Maybe that's on your list. And then number four was to save more money, I think. To save more money. And many people, that is what will give them a better life. And that makes sense on some level. And while these things could improve your life, they could make life a little bit easier, they may even make your life better, I think we all know they are inadequate. And we also know that around the 1st of February, all the gyms in town will go back to the crowds they normally have. All the resolution people will sort of fade out. We also know that it won't take long before that Christmas candy that you threw away right after Christmas, let's get rid of this, will be replaced by Valentine's candy. And those new routines that you have begun will too often revert back to old ruts. You see, our resolve so often resembles the things in which we place it. It is temporary. They are temporary. Our resolve is transitory, as those things are as well. It's all inadequate. But in John chapter 14, verse 6, Jesus says something radical. It's a part of a larger statement about his identity. He's talking to his disciples, and he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, Jesus says. We want to look at that third part there, that third identifier. Jesus says, I am the life. He's claiming that real life, meaningful life, full life, abundant life, eternal life is available. And it doesn't come from our accomplishments, our achievements, or the accumulation of things. Nor does it come from self-improvement or feeling better. It comes from Jesus. He is the life. I want you to think about his statement. Think about it not as someone who is at church or maybe grew up at church or has been around the Bible for a long time or has a long-standing faith. Think about it from someone who is new to his statement. What if you heard someone say, I am the life? You can't get to God except coming through me. If you want life, you need to know me. And if you think about his statement, it's either incredibly arrogant and has no basis in reality, or it's profoundly true. And if true, the truth of his statement that Jesus is the life has extremely important implications for you and for me. Not just for eternity, but even in this life right now. Do you have the life God created you to have? Are you living the life he made you to live? Are you just trying to improve your life, to find meaning and fulfillment in the things of the world? Or are you truly going to Jesus to find life? This morning in this message, we're going to do something a little bit different. I want to look at 3 different stories in Scripture. We're going to move kind of fast through these stories. 3 different stories in Scripture. And I think by layering these stories on top of each other, a picture will begin to emerge of the life that Jesus is and the life that he offers. The first one comes from the Old Testament, Ezekiel chapter 37. This is a dramatic story of a conversation between God and his prophet Ezekiel. And it sounds like something you'd see in a modern day movie with special effects. It's pretty interesting. So the context, the southern kingdom of Judah has been ransacked by Babylon. They've come in, they've taken many of the Israelite people into Babylonian captivity. And you can imagine, these are God's covenant people. Now they're being taken out of their land, they're taken into captivity, and they are wondering, where is God? God, how could you allow this? God, why are you allowing us to suffer? Why aren't you taking care of us? You made all of these promises. God, why are you not here doing something? Maybe you've had the same prayer, or at least felt those feelings. Now, never mind that the reason they're in Babylonian captivity is because of their own rebellion. They, like we, often forget our part in the story, and we just want to know, God, why aren't you doing something to change my circumstances? And God gives them, his people, a message of assurance, a message of hope. And to do that, he uses his prophet, his mouthpiece, Ezekiel. And for Ezekiel to give them that message, he first wants to give Ezekiel that message. And to do that, he takes him on a little field trip. He takes him to this massive valley filled with bones. Ezekiel chapter 37, verse 1. The hand of the Lord was on me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and he set me in the middle of a valley. It was full of bones. He led me back and forth among them, and I saw a great many bones on the floor of the valley, bones that were very dry. He asked me, Son of man, can these bones live? I said, Sovereign Lord, you alone know. Right answer, Ezekiel. Good answer. And so God told his prophet to speak to the bones, and that God would make breath enter these dry bones through the words of his prophet, and that these dead bones would then come to life. And that people would know when they hear this, when they see this imagery, they would know that God is a God of life, and that God is powerful, and that God can do anything he wants to. See, this was a message of hope for the people of Israel, pointing past their current circumstances, all the way actually to the cross of Jesus that would ultimately unify and restore God's people, and obviously provide life everlasting. So picture this scene in your mind as we continue to read what happens. Verse 7. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I was prophesying, there was a noise, a rattling sound, and the bones came together, bone to bone. I looked, and tendons and flesh appeared on them, and skin covered them, but there was no breath in them. And then he said to me, Prophesy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, This is what the sovereign Lord says, Come, breath, from the four winds, from every direction, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life, and they stood up on their feet, a vast army. You see, God is demonstrating something to his prophet and to his people. He is saying to them, this is what I will do for you. I will breathe life into you. I will put my spirit in you, the word for breath in the New Testament. I will restore you. I will bring you out of the valley of death, and I will bring you to life. What a dramatic message. What an amazing story. And so that sets the stage for our second story. I told you we're going to move fast. This one is from the New Testament, John chapter 11. We don't have time to go into all the details of the story, but basically Jesus' good friend Lazarus has become ill. He is sick. And Mary and Martha, Lazarus' sisters, send for Jesus because they know he can do something for their brother and his friend. But Jesus decides to wait a few days before he goes back to see Lazarus. His plan was to help his friend, but his plan was so much more expansive than that. And that's why he makes this statement in verse 4. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Remember what Jesus says there. It's an important element in this story. Jesus, of course, wants to help his friend Lazarus. He knows he's going to do something, but he knows this moment is much bigger than one man's life. This is an opportunity to send a message. Sound familiar? God spoke to Ezekiel through this demonstration to send a message. And now, Jesus says, God is sending a message. The message is that he will be glorified and his Son will be glorified. He will be identified as coming from God because God brings life. So Jesus finally goes back, and when he gets there, if you know the story, Lazarus is dead. Martha and Mary are upset. Jesus, where were you? Why didn't you come back? You could have done something. They put Lazarus' body in a grave. It's been there a few days, and so as you can imagine, it's starting to show the signs of death and decay. In fact, it stinks. The sisters express disappointment, and in their conversation about life and death, Jesus makes a statement that is bedrock truth for what we're talking about today. He says this in verse 25, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" And Martha says, Of course, Jesus. I know my brother will rise again one day in the future on the final resurrection. But then Jesus does something remarkable. He gives her a taste, just a taste of this life in this life. This taste of resurrection life in this life. This taste of something that is beyond our circumstances, beyond death even. Not just eternity, but he gives her a glimpse, a taste of it right here, right now. He walks to that tomb of her brother, of his friend. And with a word, he speaks to that dead man, "Come out." And that's exactly what happens. Lazarus comes out of the grave, still wearing some of his grave clothes. Jesus shows that he has the power over death, that he is from God. He is glorified, just as he said he would be. Finally, the third story. We'll look at Matthew's account, Matthew 28. This is the overarching story that ties it all together and anchors our hope in eternity. This is the story of Jesus' resurrection. It takes place on a Friday night on a hill outside of Jerusalem that locals called Golgotha. You know what happened there. Jesus was crucified. He was nailed to that cross. He willingly gave up his life. And after his death, he was placed in a borrowed tomb. And that tomb was sealed with a huge stone. But if you know the story, you know that he didn't stay inside that tomb, that God raised him to life. Matthew's account puts it this way in chapter 28, verse 2. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone, and he sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. The angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He is risen. Just as he said, come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. Then you will see him. Now I have told you." I wish we had more time to really dig into these stories. I would encourage you on your own to take the time. Maybe it's been a while since you've read some of these stories. Maybe you've never heard these stories. Open up your Bible and spend some time in these stories. But I want to bring out some things in these stories that I think really are important for us to know as we consider Jesus is the life. You see 3 different stories, but the same result. All 3 of these stories move from the hopelessness of death to the renewal and the joy of new life. And as we look at some of the common elements in these stories, I think it will begin to help us find some language for our own situation, but more importantly, find hope. Find hope for the life Jesus offers. And so the first thing I want you to notice about all 3 of these stories and about your story is the pain of death. We must embrace the reality of death. It's something we all have in common. Unless Jesus comes back first, we are all going to die. Don't you feel encouraged today? You came to church to hear an encouraging word, and the preacher said, we're all going to die. But it is truth, right? In Ezekiel, those dry bones in the valley were the remains of Israelite soldiers who died on the battlefield, and they were left there. The valley of dry bones was a picture of death, a picture of destruction. It was a visual reminder. When you see bones, when you see a skeleton, unless it's in a high school science room, you know that used to be a live person, but something happened. They died. You see, those bones represent death. In Lazarus' story, he was sick, but ultimately, his body succumbed to his sickness, and he too died. And even Jesus was crucified. Nails pierced his hands and his feet. He died a cruel death on a cross. And so death is represented by what happened to Jesus on Friday at Calvary. We must embrace death. There is pain in death. There is sorrow in death. And if you live long enough, you will experience that pain and that sorrow, as some of you know so well. What about for us? As the psalmist said in Psalm 44, we face death all day long, don't we? The threat of physical death is always there. And for many people, it is a fear. It's not just a threat, it is a legitimate fear. But also there is the death and the darkness that comes with just living in a fallen world. Things aren't as they should be. And we are both victims of and contributors to our world's fallenness. Not one of us can escape the valley of the shadow of death. Some of you are experiencing death right now. Maybe you're fearful about your own death, whenever that might be. But the older you get, the more that becomes a reality, and it's scary. Maybe for some of you, it's the death of a loved one, the physical, literal death of a loved one. But all of us are facing death in other forms. Maybe the death of a relationship, the death of a dream, the loss of hope, the loss of peace, the loss of health, or maybe some other form of loss. For us to understand and experience true life, we must acknowledge death. We must experience the pain of Friday. We must grieve our losses. But then when Friday is over, what happens next? There's Saturday. Which brings us to the second thing I want to highlight from these stories, and that is the uncertainty of the in-between. This is a critical part of these stories, the uncertainty of the interim. If death is marked by Friday, then the in-between is felt on Saturday, a day of uncertainty, a day of disappointment, a time of doubt and fear. In Ezekiel's story, those dry bones lay barren and broken in the valley for years. Those soldiers didn't get a proper burial. They were left to rot in the open field. It was a scene of destruction, a symbol of hopelessness. And although it was a vision, if you play out the vision, anyone who walks by, anybody who travels by, they see the valley of dry bones. What do they think? What happened here? What happened here? How tragic this must have been. You see, that's the nature of the in-between. It is filled with remorse and questions and doubt. In fact, that's what we hear. That's what we see in this story. Verse 11, back in Ezekiel 37. Then he said to me, Son of man, those bones are the people of Israel. They represent all of Israel. They say, our bones are dried up, and our hope is gone. We are cut off. He's acknowledging that this is a time of hopelessness in their lives. They are wondering where God is. How could you allow us to be taken into captivity? What happened to our nation? What happened to us as a covenant people? We have lost our hope. Their hopelessness is represented by this visual sign, this valley of dry bones. What about in Lazarus' story? He's in the tomb for 4 days. What are his sisters doing? They're grieving, yes. What do they do when Jesus arrives? They are questioning him. Jesus, if you just would have been here, what took you so long? You could have done something. We sent for you. Did you not hear us? How many times do we pray to God in the in-between? God, don't you hear me? If you would just do something. You could have done something to change this. You still can. Will you? Are you going to? Where are you? Those are the questions that Martha and Mary were asking. You see, that's the nature of the in-between. After death, before life. Jesus was buried in a borrowed tomb. And what were his disciples doing? They were huddled together in fear behind locked doors, asking those same types of questions. What are we going to do? Did you know this was going to happen? Well, he said it, but I didn't believe him. I didn't know it was going to be like this. Where do we go? What do we do? We don't have our leader here. All the doubt, all the fear. You see, Saturday's painful. As difficult as Friday is, the hopelessness of Saturday is almost unbearable. The uncertainty, the fear, the anxiety, the questions, the not knowing, the waiting, the wondering. Maybe it sounds familiar to you. On Saturday, evil seems to gain ground, and death gloats over us. Look around. You'll see the dry bones. You'll smell the decaying bodies. You'll feel the delayed promises. I would argue that this is where we find ourselves collectively right now. Life, in many respects, was birthed at the garden. Death came at the fall. And now we await the final resurrection to life. And it feels like evil is winning sometimes, doesn't it? It feels like death is gloating over us, that it has all the power, that God is silent. Our bones are getting dry and brittle and broken. And doubt creeps in. And we question God. And we wonder why he didn't, and if he ever will, and where is he? We find ourselves in the in-between. Much of life seems to be lived in the uncertainty of Saturday. And as badly as we want to, we can't skip this time. We can't skip Saturday. Why did Jesus wait a few days before he went back to help Lazarus? I mean, why didn't he just go straight back and he either make Lazarus well, or if he had already died, raise him immediately? Do you remember Jesus told us why? Because God would be glorified. Think about that for a moment. He waited to do something so that he could be glorified. You see, that's what happens on Saturday. That's what the in-between is all about. The in-between is a time and a space where faith is refined, where hope is born. Saturday is where our hunger for healing happens, where our longing for real life takes root. We can't skip from death straight to life. We must sit in the uncertainty of Saturday and learn to look for and long for God. Maybe you find yourself in that space right now. You can relate. Well, hang on, because there is death. There is the middle ground of uncertainty, but there is something else. Do Do you remember Jesus said, I am the life? There is the victory of new life. God wanted Ezekiel to see something remarkable and then to pass that message on. It was a message of the power of God to bring life where there is impossible realities, where there is death. Go back to verse 9 and 10 of Ezekiel 37. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, son of man, and say to it, this is what the sovereign Lord says, come, breath, from the four winds, meaning from every direction, into these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and breath entered them. They came to life, and they stood up on their feet, a vast army. Can you imagine seeing that? Can you imagine witnessing that? Your attention would be drawn from the sight that you were beholding to the source of the power behind the story. And you would be in awe. And that's the whole point of the story, that God would be glorified, that your eyes would be fixed on him and his power to overcome anything in your life, any circumstance, even death itself will not have victory over you. Much to the surprise of those watching, Lazarus' story did not end in death. They thought his story was over. And then here he is, alive and well. John 11:43. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And we know the rest of the story at Calvary. There was no way that tomb was going to hold Jesus. God rolled that stone away, and he breathed life into his son just as he did into those dry bones. Jesus rose from the grave. Do you see what's unfolded here? Do you see this picture of life? The death of Friday that became the uncertainty of Saturday gave way to the victory of Sunday. Death was swallowed up in life. When Jesus said, I am the life, he was assuring us of the resounding anthem of the prophets who wrote, death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where is your sting? God is the God who brings life where there is death. Death will not have the final word. There may be a time of waiting, a time of wondering, a time of doubt and uncertainty and fear. As painful as Friday is, as difficult as Saturday is, hang on, because as they say, Sunday's coming. And so as we conclude, I want to call us back to that question. That question. Do you remember the question that God asked his prophet Ezekiel when he showed him the dry bones throughout the valley? Do you remember the question? The question was this: can these bones live? Look at these bones. Look at the death and destruction. Look at the pain and the sorrow, the devastation. Can there be any life here? Well, the obvious answer is no. That's impossible. Everything in my human logic says, look at this situation. It is not anything about life. It is all about death. Maybe God is asking you a similar question this morning about your valley. When everything seems impossible, when hope seems to be fading, maybe he's asking you, can you find healing and hope in your situation? Is that possible? Maybe he's asking you if you think he can redeem the pain of your life, the pain of your past, the pain of Friday. Whether or not he can meet you in the uncertainty of Saturday and sit with you. Maybe he's asking you if you think there's any hope for your life, or for your marriage, or for your family, or for your struggles, or for your future. Is there any hope for your life after this life? Is there any hope for something better? When Ezekiel was asked this question, he wisely answered, I don't know, only you know, Lord. And then what did God do? It's as if God was saying, yes, that's right, but I want you to know the answer too. So look at this. And he took him to the valley, he showed him the dry bones, and then he used Ezekiel, in his words, his prophecy, to breathe life into those bones so that he could see, so that the whole nation could see, so they would know the answer to that question. Yes, these bones can live. He wants you to see and to know the answer to your question. Yes, whatever situation it is, even death itself, there can be life because God breathes life into death. That's what he does. If God can take breath from the four winds and give it, breathe it into dry bones. If Jesus can speak a word and call a dead, decomposing man out of the grave, if God can roll the stone away so that his son Jesus never faces death again, don't you think that he can breathe the breath of his Spirit into you in your life? Jesus is the life. Without him, you don't have real life. You may be alive, you may have a pulse, your heart may be beating, you may even be breathing. But apart from Jesus, you don't have the life he created you to live. He is the life. So go ahead and make your resolutions and make your plans and goals. That's a good thing. Those aren't bad. They may improve your life, but they won't give you life. Only Jesus can do that. And if you need Jesus this morning, don't wait any longer. Reach out to him. In just a minute, when we stand, a couple of our shepherds and their wives will be in the parlor, a room right back here. You can exit, go around there if you want to talk to them or have them pray for you. Or you can come down to the front, and we will do that as a church family. Maybe today you're realizing that your life isn't the life God made you to live. The life you're living, maybe it's a good life, maybe it's a decent life, but it's missing something. It's missing Jesus. And today you're ready to surrender your life to the one who gives you life. You're ready to claim your faith in Jesus and be baptized into Christ. Don't wait any longer. Do that today. What a great way to start the year. If there's something we can do for you this morning, we invite you to come as we stand and sing. Let's stand together.